The flashing red and blue lights painted my ranch gate in a surreal glow. And for a split second, I thought some terrible crime had landed on my doorstep. But then I saw her. Karen. Standing there with her arms crossed like she was the warden of the county, yelling at two officers she had clearly summoned like her personal guards. And right next to her was my teenage daughter, wide-eyed, arms clutched around her backpack as if she were being taken in for questioning. The sight nearly broke me. She doesn't belong here. Karen's voice cut across the night like a rusty blade. This girl has been left unsupervised, wandering across land she has no right to be on. You need to remove her immediately before something terrible happens. One of the officers shifted uncomfortably, looking between my daughter and the woman spitting orders at them. Ma'am, are you saying this girl isn't part of the family living here? That's exactly what I'm saying. Karen snapped, her smug grin spreading like oil on water. She's trespassing. She's at risk. I called you to protect her. These people don't belong in this neighborhood. And she's proof of it. For a moment, I didn't move. I wanted to see how far she would push this fantasy. My daughter, standing at the gate of her own ranch, accused of being a trespasser by a woman who had never set foot on this land until she started sniffing around for control. But when I saw the tears welling up in my girl's eyes, something inside me snapped. I stepped out of the shadows, my boots crunching on the gravel. Officers, I said in a steady, low voice that made both of them turn. Before you go another step, let me clear something up. That girl is my daughter. This land is my ranch. And you're standing on the property of the elected sheriff of this county. The silence that followed was a silence so heavy even the cicadas stopped singing. The younger officer's hand fell from his belt. The older one blinked twice, recognition dawning in his eyes. Sheriff Reynolds. He asked carefully. Yes, I replied, pulling out my badge and holding it up so the cruiser's headlights gleamed off the gold. Sheriff Reynolds. The man who swore an oath to protect every citizen of this county, including my daughter, against people who abuse the law for their own selfish gain. Karen's face froze, her mouth still open in mid-smirk. This is a trick, she screeched. He's lying. He can't be the sheriff. Why would the sheriff live out here like some ranch hand? My badge gleamed again as I lowered it. Because unlike you, I know what it means to earn something with honest work. This land's been in my family for generations. I serve this county from the station downtown, but I live here. And you, ma'am, just called two of my deputies to try to kidnap my daughter from her own home. The crowd was already gathering. Neighbors who had heard the sirens stood at the fence line, phones raised, recording every second. I could see the confusion on the officers' faces melting into anger, not at me, but at the woman who had wasted their time and dragged them into her vendetta. Karen tried to rally. She jabbed a finger toward my daughter. She's lying. She doesn't even look like you. She doesn't belong here. The air went colder than steel. My daughter's chin quivered as she looked up at me, and I knew the damage Karen had just done went deeper than trespassing. She had attacked family. She had attacked blood. And that was something I would never forgive. I placed a protective hand on my daughter's shoulder and spoke directly to Karen. You've crossed the line. Harassing me is one thing. Harassing my child, that's a crime. And lucky for you, I know exactly how to file it. Karen's confidence cracked. Her voice shook as she tried to bark orders at the officers. Arrest him. Arrest him now. He's threatening me. But the older deputy stepped forward, his face set like stone. Ma'am, you've made a false report. Interfered with a minor. and trespassed on private property. That's 3 counts already. If you keep this up, we're going to have to bring you in." The color drained from her cheeks, but still she sputtered. "You're protecting him because he's your boss." The younger deputy glanced at me, then back at her. "No, ma'am. We're protecting his daughter from you." Her jaw dropped, but before she could protest, another car pulled up behind the cruisers. Out stepped my undersheriff. A woman with a presence so commanding the murmurs of the crowd died instantly. She took one look at the scene, listened to the deputy's brief explanation, then turned to Karen with an icy calm. "Ma'am, you're under investigation for harassment and attempted child endangerment. You can come quietly, or we can make it loud. Your choice." Karen stumbled back, sputtering. "You don't understand. The HOA put me in charge. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." I stepped forward, my voice steady, my anger hidden under layers of control. "No, Karen. You weren't protecting anyone. You were trying to control them. And tonight, you tried to use the police as your personal weapon against my family. That's not protection. That's abuse of power." The crowd erupted in applause. Neighbors who had lived under her tyranny for years shouted encouragement, calling her out, some even thanking me directly for standing up to her. Phones captured every moment, and I knew by dawn this would be everywhere Karen exposed, not just to our block, but to the entire county. And yet, the night wasn't finished. As Karen was led to the cruiser in cuffs, a young man pushed through the crowd. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "Sheriff," he said breathlessly, "I need to tell you something. I'm on the HOA board. She's been lying to all of us. She told us she had county approval to enforce on your land. She told us if we didn't back her up, we'd be fined or evicted. But it was all fake. She forged documents. I saw her do it." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Karen shrieked, trying to twist out of the deputy's grip. "Lies. All lies." But the young man shook his head firmly. "I've got copies. Emails. Screenshots. I'll testify." That was the twist none of us expected. A whistleblower from her own camp. Suddenly, it wasn't just my word against hers. It was her own board, turning on her, exposing the rot from within. And as the cruiser door slammed shut and the night grew still again, I felt the weight of justice settle, not just for me, not just for my daughter, but for every neighbor who had been pushed around by Karen's arrogance. The cruiser door slammed, and the echo felt like thunder rolling across the ranch. Karen's screams grew muffled behind the glass, her hands still flailing, her voice cracking with desperate half-sentences no one believed anymore. The neighbors who had gathered at the fence erupted into chatter, voices layering over each other, phones still raised, disbelief turning into something else, relief. For the first time in years, people dared to speak freely. The young man from the HOA board, still trembling but steady in his resolve, handed me a small folder. "It's all here," he whispered. Copies of the documents she forged. The emails where she bragged about tricking the board. Even notes where she said she'd use the police as her private army if anyone resisted. His eyes darted nervously toward the crowd. I was scared. "Sheriff, she threatened my family. But after what she just tried with your daughter, that I can't keep quiet anymore." I placed a hand on his shoulder and met his gaze. "You did the right thing. You're not the one on trial here, she is. And you've just made sure she won't wriggle out of this one." By morning, the story spread faster than wildfire. Videos of Karen shrieking at my daughter, screaming about HOA power while in handcuffs, went viral across the county. Local stations ran it on repeat. And before long, it was national news. HOA president arrested for false report and child endangerment sheriff victim of plot. But the true storm came when investigators raided her home and office. The whistleblower's evidence opened the floodgates. Forged signatures, doctored bylaws, illegal fines siphoned into her personal account. Threats against anyone who stood in her way, it was all laid bare. What had started as a petty power trip to control lawns and mailboxes unraveled into a full-blown criminal scheme. The trial that followed became the most watched event in the county courthouse's history. Karen arrived in shackles, no longer in her gaudy floral blouses, but in the drab orange of the county jail. Gone was the smug smile, replaced by eyes that darted nervously at the cameras. She tried everything: tears, rage, denial, but every piece of evidence crushed her lies further. When the young board member testified, his voice shaking as he read her forged threats aloud, the entire courtroom sat in stunned silence. The jury didn't deliberate long. Guilty on all counts: harassment, forgery, fraud, child endangerment, abuse of authority. The judge's gavel fell with a weight that felt like justice itself. Karen sobbed, pleading for leniency, but no one wept with her. Even her former allies looked away in shame. She was sentenced not just to prison, but barred for life from serving on any neighborhood or municipal board. The day the sentence was read, neighbors gathered at my ranch, not to mourn, but to celebrate. They brought food, shook my hand, hugged my daughter, and for the first time in years, there was laughter where there had only been fear. My daughter, who had been so shaken that night, stood tall again, smiling as the community surrounded her with love. "Dad," she whispered, "we're free now." The HOA dissolved within weeks. In its place, the neighborhood formed a volunteer council, not to control, but to support. We planted trees where Karen had once ordered fences torn down. We hosted barbecues instead of citation hearings. And that cursed clipboard she once carried like a weapon, one neighbor burned it at a bonfire, and the cheers could be heard across the fields. For me, the victory wasn't just in watching her fall. It was in watching my community rise. People who had been silenced by fear found their voices again. Families who had hidden in their homes now waved at each other across fences. The ranch felt alive again, not as a battlefield, but as a gathering place. One evening, as the sun set gold across the horizon, I stood by that same gate where it all began. My daughter leaned against the post, a new wooden sign freshly carved hanging above her head. In bold, hand-painted letters it read, "Family protected here." She looked up at me with a grin. "Think that'll keep the Karens away?" I laughed, pulling her close. "It'll remind them whose side the law is really on." Because the truth is, titles and power mean nothing if they're built on lies. What matters is integrity, and the courage to stand firm when someone abuses their position. Karen thought she could bend the law, but she learned the hard way that the law bends for no one. So here's the question I'll leave you with. When someone tries to use authority to tear apart a family, when they twist rules into weapons, do you stay silent out of fear, or do you rise, like we did, to show them that truth always wins? Which do you believe is the real path to justice?